Hello, and welcome to From Grief to Purpose, where we take life's hardest moments and turn them into something greater. I'm your host, Nina, and together we're going to get into the real depth about loss, healing, and finding a deeper divine purpose. Whether you've lost someone, something, or even yourself, this is the place where we keep it real, find hope, and walk that journey out together. Are you ready to journey this journey together? Well, let's get into it. Well, welcome to this special episode. As you can see, the title of the podcast has changed. It is now From Grief to Purpose. It's still brought to you by That Dose of Encouragement, my coaching platform where you can visit all that I do, all that I offer on www.thatdoseofencouragement.com. Again, that's www.thatdoseofencouragement.com. And I'm repeating myself because I felt like I slurred the first one. But listen, God is shifting in this season. He is shifting me in this particular season. And I'm just showing up and I'm going to be obedient in this time of movement because I feel like whenever God does that, it's not just about me, but it's also about others. So I have to be present. I have to show up and just be the vessel that He needs me to be for somebody else. So again, the new podcast title for my current followers of this podcast is now From Grief to Purpose. So formerly That Dose of Encouragement, now From Grief to Purpose. So I hope that you journey along with me. So listen, today's episode marks an important shift in the direction of this podcast and in the coaching services that I offer. I want to take a moment to explain what's exactly changing and why during this episode. So I'm going to be moving toward a focus on grief coaching and purpose empowerment coaching. It's something that's very special for me, and I'm going to explain why here in a minute. And gosh darn it, I forgot my box of tissues. So if I start tearing up during this episode, please excuse me. But like I said, I'm embracing this entire process, which I hope you do as well as we journey along in this process of really it's just growth and moving towards healing and moving towards a greater purpose. So grief is not just a topic, I want to explore, first of all. It's a reality that I actually lived. And it has shaped the way I walk through life today. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. My life just worked out in the way that it has worked out. It is my life. I cannot run from it. The experiences that I have experiences, I cannot hide them. I cannot hide from them. It's my life. And so I'm going to show up and be authentic during this podcast and be walk in my truth because I know that it's going to impact and it may help somebody else. So let me take this time just to share a little bit of what was my journey and what is my journey. But what was my journey? It started off like this. The first significant loss that I ever experienced, and I shared this before, but I'm going into it again for this particular podcast episode because we are shifting towards the new direction that this podcast is heading in and is going forward in. But the first significant loss I ever experienced was the loss of my mother when I had just turned 16. My mother passed away from breast cancer, a cancer that had, and I always mess up this word, y'all, but I've commenced it to memory because, it was said multiple times during her phases of cancer, but it had metastasized throughout her entire body. And she died just 3 days after my birthday. So I remember it was my birthday. I remember sitting at her, bedside. It was actually during a time where she had hospice coming to our home to take care of her because she was that, um, bedridden to the point, where she could not take care of herself. And I remember, because she was in a coma state, excuse me, at this point, not coherent, not able to respond. Ooh, and here comes the tears, and I don't have any tissue. But she was at a point where she couldn't talk. And I remember sitting at her bed and on my birthday, just saying, "Mommy, it's my birthday." I had turned 16 years old. And I remember saying, "Oh, happy birthday." And then I sang happy birthday to myself as she was sitting there, and it was just me and her in the room. And that was my moment of, just being able to celebrate my birthday with her. And generally, my mom was one to celebrate all of our birthdays. She would do something, even when she didn't have the most money, she would celebrate us in some type of way, whether it was like inviting our friends over or bringing a cake or even her making a cake for us and just us celebrating it together as siblings, as a family. But at this particular moment, because I wanted to celebrate my birthday so bad with my mother and just wish that she was, fully healthy and able to do so, even her being able to be awake in that moment in the bed, I would have just, had loved that. But just the moment just to be there with her, even though she was not coherent, that was still everything to me. And so that's how I brought in my 16th birthday. As I'm even reflecting back on this now, I brought in my 16th birthday, talking to my mother, singing happy birthday to myself as my mother was basically in a coma. She wasn't coherent, but I feel in my spirit she heard me. That experience was so overwhelming to me that I didn't even realize, honestly, how deeply it had affected me. I blocked out so much. And as you can hear, as you heard in my voice, like it's still painful, you guys, like it's still a little painful because that was my mother. You know what I'm saying? She birthed me, the woman that gave birthed me. I'm not going to say give me life because, God gives you life. But she birthed me, I am a part of her and my father's DNA. Their blood runs through me. So it was such an experience that was so overwhelming though. And I didn't realize how deeply it had affected me. I blocked out so much of it for years, refused to truly, honestly acknowledge that it had happened. I just continued on, with life as a teenager, trying to figure it all out, I guess. But because of the hurts, the pain and the feeling of being lost at that time in my life took a heavy turn. Like I fell into depression, struggling with my self-worth, and I found myself in unhealthy relationships, to be honest, as a teenager. And looking back, it felt like my life stopped, if that makes sense. Like it felt like my life had stopped. And yet I was still going, right? I'm a teenager, I'm in high school, I'm still moving, I'm still doing some of the things. Of course, I'm not as active. I'm not volunteering. I'm not trying to try out for things that I should be, doing, actively being involved in the community of school. I'm doing none of that, friend. None of it. It's like, I don't want to show up. Like, I'm going to go to school because I know that I need to graduate at this point in my life. But I just did not honestly, as I look back, um, I didn't understand how to move forward without my mother. So what I felt like it was the feeling that I was going through. I just felt like, what was I supposed to do now? Like, what was I supposed to do? How am I supposed to show up? Like, I remember having this thought of who is supposed to teach me how to be a woman, how to grow and evolve as a young lady into the woman, quote unquote, that I was supposed to be, that I was supposed to become. I remember having that question, what was I supposed to do? Like, it was a very loud question that lingered for me um, for a long time, honestly, for quite some time, well into my 20s and my 30s. And even now, I have like moments of, wishing my mother was here to ask her certain questions. Because, yes, I have had some women mentors in my life, and I have aunts or had aunts um, in my life. A lot of them have, some have gone on to be with the Lord, but there's nothing like your mother, and having her there to ask those questions because you are a part of her. So you want her answer. So, friends, listen, this is only the beginning of my story. The story gets deeper, honestly, and maybe even sadder, but I know many of you have experienced great loss too. How did you cope with it? Like, how did you cope? Back then, I didn't know how to. Honestly, I did not know how to cope with grief as I shared. I blacked out a lot of the experiences. And then honestly, I had a good dad, in the sense that, um, my dad worked hard. He was a hard worker. He did what he needed to do. We had food on our, to eat. We had a roof over our head. We had clothes on our back. They may not have been designer clothes, but we had clothes to wear to school. Okay. And he also taught us a sense of work. I can remember working starting to work at the age of 13 and 14. That was something also my mother instilled in us too. But he was not an emotional man. My father was not the emotional type to where we discussed our emotions. We talked, like we had conversations about my mother's passing and so forth. And how did that impact us, and how was it, shaping us, So my question to you is, like, if you've gone through grief, how did you cope? Like, how did you cope during your time of loss? Um, Again, like back then, I just did not know how to. I did not know what the stages of grief were or what I should expect. Of course, I know them now and what to expect, just, being my background. I have a degree in bachelor's in psychology. I'm a graduate student in the field of psychology. Um, and, understand and have gone through certification for grief coaching and counseling. So I know what the stages are now, you know. But back then, no one around me, encouraged me to seek therapy. And at that point in my life, I didn't have a strong relationship with God. Honestly, listen, I didn't know God like that at all. We were not a family that went to church. We were not a religious, quote unquote, family. I would say we maybe had a Christian sort of, kind of um, background or a small foundation, because it wasn't a strong foundation. Because I feel like if it was a strong foundation, our family would have been in church, or been introduced to a form of, of Christ, Jesus Christ, listen. But we weren't, my dad, I believe he grew up Baptist in the Baptist church, and my mother came up, I remember her saying, is in the Catholic church. And so as a family, we weren't one to really like go to church like that. We went to church on special occasions, like most non-church goers do. We went sometimes on Easter, which is Resurrection Sunday as I know it now, and sometimes on Christmas, like which was very rare. Okay, it was very rare. It was not like a traditional. We're gonna go to church on these particular holidays. It was more of like a let's go to church. Like like a feeling like that. My parents like like we should go to church today type of thing. So we went. So as a teenager, I grew up on the days. I remember my mother as she when she found out she was sick and she was going through the stages. Again, I didn't have a full understanding of her sickness because she kept it secret for quite some time. And I'll get into that in later episodes. But I remember her wanting to go to church. during this time. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why? Like, why are we going to church? I don't feel like going to church. Like, no. Especially if there was anything of involvement back then where I had to put on stockings, because stockings, y'all, was a big thing back then. Now I know, like, it's not now, like, as far as the fashion trends, like, hardly anyone is wearing stockings or tights. I think tights are still kind of in, doing certain outfits. Look, the fashionista is coming out of me. But back then, I was kind of like tomboyish. I was like, I'm not putting on stockings. I barely want to put on a dress. Okay. Like, I am not, I don't want to go to church. I do not. Like, why are we going to church? Hindsight being 2020, of course, like my mother was trying to um, reconnect, as far as spiritually, with her relationship with God and wanting to get her family, in order, and making sure probably that we also had a community around us during her stages of the last stages of her going through cancer. And I'm sure she probably knew, or maybe she had a what if, like, if I leave this earth, and I'm sure they probably gave her a, Miss Smith, you have X amount of days to live, which she never shared with us. Um, she probably knew. She knew that, but she was protecting us, and she didn't tell us a lot of things. So we kind of was walking it out with her, but walking it out from our end blindly. And I can only speak for myself, but we were walking out blindly without all the information. And so I didn't want to go to church because we weren't a family that went to church. So it's kind of like springing something new on somebody that you just have no familiarity with. And you're like, no, like, this is not a part of our normal routine. I'll pass. Thanks. You guys can go. I'll stay home. But I am not showing up for whatever the process is. Whatever happens in church, I don't want to be there. So that point, it just when we didn't have someone, or I didn't have that strong relationship with God, and didn't really have anyone in my family really that was sharing, like, that spiritual side, or giving of that spiritual side to us. We kind of were just, we just carried on like nothing had happened, after my mother's passing, even though inside, you all, I was crumbling, I was, could just, dying on the inside and keeping it all in emotionally because I had no one to talk to, not even my father. I had no one to talk to about it. Um, Often, though, every now and then I would contact one of my aunts and my grandmother, and I'll get into that later. But with me crumbling on the inside and having no one to talk to, no outlet, no support, strong support outlet, I was failing in school, friends. Because I had no outlet for my emotions, I remember honestly being surprised. Not being surprised, let me not say that. I remember having to work hard when it was like, okay, the realization was coming that this is my last year in high school, 12th grade, it's time to graduate. And the feeling came in me, like this sense of I have to graduate came upon me because I was lagging in school. Like, I was so, like, depressed and sad, and just, like, sad too that if I graduate, like, my mother is not gonna be there to see me graduate, so kinda like, what is the point? Like, I am not here for this whole process, the whole show, this emotional roller coaster, like, I did not wanna show up for it. But, this feeling came on me like, "No, I have to graduate." And when I tell you it was some work where I was A and B student, like, before my mother's passing, to I dropped to a C student. Like, I had a C minus. Like, when I tell you I was pulling those grades up, I had to put in the work, like, that strength or encouragement had to come upon me to even get through high school. Listen, I pulled that thing from somewhere, and that because I did not know the Lord at that time, I have to say that was a God moment for me. That was a pull from within my own, sense of self and my own um sense of power that, God gives you, God creates you with. But I was pulling from a very a very deep place to graduate high school. And the graduation process was a whole, emotional moment for me as well. But anyway, we'll talk about that during other podcast episodes. But this is why I feel led to change the direction of this podcast and my coaching, because it's an area that I definitely resonate with. So I'm shifting gears because I realize how important it is to address grief head on, to process it, and to move toward healing and growth. It's a journey I've been on, and I want to walk that journey with you all. Because healing is for us all. Even though we face significant loss, it is not a place that we have to stay. Grief is not a place that you stay. And whether, you know, that grief experience that you're going through now or that you experience, grief is a significant loss. So whether it was the loss of a beloved one like myself, whether it was a loss of relationship, you have separated someone, you've gone through a divorce, the loss of a job, the loss of a baby, you had a miscarriage, whether it was the loss of whatever was significant to you, loss is loss. So this podcast is dedicated to you, it's dedicated to me. And let's move forward together. Let's go forward together towards healing, towards growth, and towards sharing our stories. So during this podcast these episodes coming forward, I'm going to tell you there may be tears, and there will definitely be moments though of laughter, but at the end of this journey, I know there's a greater purpose that God has in store for us all. So I am committed to sharing my deepest experiences of grief with you, and I'll be inviting others to share their authentic stories as well. And that my hope is that through conversations, you'll find a voice that resonates with your particular journey. Because once again, I don't remember having a voice when I was going through my journey, anyone to talk to, something to listen to while I was grieving, of course, and I've been through a ton of grief moments. Not funny, but you know how you just can look back and sometimes you got to look back and just kind of laugh a little bit. Laughter is therapy. Ooh, maybe we might have some comedians on the podcast. That would be so dope. Um, but I don't remember having a voice to listen to connect with during moments of grief. And again, because grief can be significant. Grief is just a significant loss to you. I've definitely gone through, of course, the loss of loved ones. The first significant being the loss of my mother. I've already experienced the loss of my father. My father passed away in 2020. I've experienced the loss of many, many relatives that I feel like have left this earth way too soon. And I'm a little upset about it. These are just my feelings. I'm going to be true to my own feelings. I am upset that they have left this earth way too soon, especially my mother and father, because you think about those moments where they won't see me, they won't see my grandchildren, they won't see their current grandchildren that are in this earth, as far as like experiencing their lives with them. My dad got a chance to see his grandchildren, though I'm thankful for that, but that he won't see them grow up into men and women. And my mother she never got that moment. So I feel like these are moments that the devil definitely stole from me. I'm upset. And that's the part that I'm upset about. Not mad at God, just upset with the devil. Um, but, these are moments that we need to share, that we need to journey through together. And it's okay. I've definitely gone through relationship loss. I've gone through divorce and just, relationship breakups, just gone through job loss and miscarriages. I've gone through that as well. So I am a vessel, I guess, of grief experiences to share. So my prayer is that the Lord uses me in a way that is impactful to you, in a way that resonates with you, with your journey, so that you can have hope for your future, so that you know that there is a greater purpose, that God has a greater purpose for you. He has a greater purpose in store for your life, that you're grieving your moment of grief, like this is not the end. There is more to come, more love to have, more moments of joy to experience, more peace to embark upon. So, again, as I'm committed to sharing my deepest experience of grief with you all, and again, I'm going to invite other people, those that are willing to be authentic, because I only want authentic and real and relevant voices, people that are not afraid to share their stories here. My hope is that through these conversations, you'll also find your voice, and then find a voice to tune into that resonates with your journey. So please make a commitment with me to tune in and be sure to subscribe, share this podcast with others, and download. Do all the things, okay? Do all the things that you got to do to get this podcast out there to others, because it helps us reach more people who may need this particular podcast. So don't just hold it all to yourself. Please share, 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 subscribe, 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 download, download, download. And if you are in need of one-on-one coaching, please tune in to, please go over to my website at www.thatdoseofencouragement.com. I will leave it in the podcast description. Again, that's www.thatdoseofencouragement.com, where I offer one-on-one coaching for grief supports. I also offer purpose empowerment coaching, as well, again, because your grief is not your end story. Okay. Your grief state is not your end story. God has a divine purpose for your life. And I also, I do a grief support. So my grief support group, if y'all hear me hitting things, I am definitely hitting things. I keep hitting the table, so excuse me. But I'm doing a grief support group. Okay. So I have a grief support group. Check it out. It's under the events tab on my website. I'm going to start doing it every second and fourth Sunday at 8 p.m. as my schedule allots. But right now it is every second and fourth Sunday of the month. The first particular support group, and it is registration based only. So if you do not register, you cannot attend this support group. So register for the support group. Again, head to my events tab and register so that I know that you will be attending a free support group. It's no charge, just for a group so that we can learn coping skills about grief. This particular support group is the grief of loss of a beloved one, though. In the future, I'm definitely considering, and I probably will do relationship loss support groups and things like that, and so forth. But if you have endured or gone through the loss of a loved one, connect with us every second and fourth Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that was it, you guys. Listen, again, we're heading to a new journey during this podcast. Hopefully, I don't know, hopefully the Lord won't switch it up again. But listen, if he does, if he changes the direction of the podcast again, I am here to be obedient and just show up for the process. But again, I can definitely understand why I'm being led to go in this direction, from grief to purpose, because God didn't just leave me in my grief. He definitely had a greater purpose for my life. I have, yes, gone through many moments of pain and hardship through the grief process and experiencing different types of grief, but it was not my end story. God has a divine purpose and calling on my life. And he is still journeying me. I'm still walking with him, and he is still leading me through and to divine purpose and callings on my life and giftings that I'm walking in and creativity that I'm experiencing. So, and I want the same for you all as well. So, thank you for being a part of this new chapter. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope that you, if you have been following the podcast already, as it was that Dose of Encouragement podcast, that you will continue to journey with me from grief to purpose in this new particular journey. Together, let's discover the purpose that lies beyond our pain, because there is one, friends. All right. Tune into the next podcast. Until next time, bye.